PaLM 2 is a powerful large language model from Google. In this course, you'll learn how to effectively use PaLM 2 and its API to enhance your productivity and develop AI-powered applications. Anya Kubo teaches this course. She is one of our most popular instructors. So let's start learning.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this full course on Google's large language model, PaLM 2. My name is Anya Kubo and I'm a software developer as well as course creator here on freeCodeCamp as well as on my own channel. If you are new to the world of large language models, this course is the perfect video for you. We will be starting completely from scratch, introducing you to this wonderful world that powers some of the most powerful AI tools today, such as Google's Bard, for example. By the end of this course, you will be able to confidently use the PaLM 2 API, as well as hopefully gain some knowledge about the world of AI in general. In fact, here's a whole list of the things that we will be covering in the next hour or so. So we will first look at why use PaLM 2, followed by what is AI and large language models in general. We will then get set up, look at tokenization, AI hallucinations, authentication, the models that come with PaLM 2, and finally, we're going to build our own AI chatbot. So that's at the end. I hope you're excited. What are we waiting for? Let's do it. First off, why use PaLM 2? Google's PaLM 2 is an advanced large language model, or LLM, designed to be more effective at a range of tasks than its predecessor, PaLM. Before we get to demystifying some of the words in that sentence, such as LLM, let's actually understand why we would want to use something like PaLM 2 in the first place. If you are a developer, here's some reasons you might think about using PaLM 2. First up, let's look at its multifunctionality. PaLM 2 is capable of various tasks, including code generation. This means you can use it for helping you code, debug your code, or explain code. So imagine you have this component here written in JavaScript, and suddenly the team decides they want to start using TypeScript. You can literally ask Google's AI tool Bard, built using PaLM 2, to convert the code for you into TypeScript. Another thing you can ask it to do is literally write the code for you from scratch. PaLM 2, in comparison to its predecessor PaLM, has been pre-trained on a broader range of data sources, meaning it has better multilingual capabilities and can handle diverse programming languages, from popular ones like Python to more specialized ones like Fortran. However, please do keep in mind that taking this code with a pinch of salt is advised, as some hallucinations, or in other words, guesswork, could have been done. And just like we did all of that with code, you can also do various tasks with mathematical reasoning, natural language generation, question answering, and translation. Heck, with PaLM 2, it even has been trained on data to make it better understanding nuances in human language, such as idioms and riddles. Pretty sure it's good at sarcasm too. PaLM 2, just like PaLM, its predecessor, also emphasizes safety in terms of responsible AI development. Google has taken measures to ensure that PaLM 2 is free from biases as much as possible and reduces harmful outputs. It's done this by the removal of personally identifiable information, filtering of duplicate data, and by performing extensive evaluations to measure potential harms and biases. And finally, PaLM 2 also offers API access for developers. Developers can leverage the PaLM 2's capabilities via the PaLM API, which we'll be using today, making it easier to build applications requiring advanced natural language processing capabilities. This can be beneficial for content generation, chatbots, summarization, classification, and more. This is the API we'll be using to build out our project at the end. In summary, as a developer, you can see PaLM 2 as a tool that offers a wide array of capabilities, ranging from natural language processing to coding assistance. I'm excited to use it via the API soon. But first, what is AI? Artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines. I say simulation as artificial intelligence is not sentient, at least not yet anyways, meaning it cannot think for itself as much as it may seem it does. Often, and this is certainly the case with tools such as this one, for example, when we say AI, we are simply referring to a term called machine learning. Machine learning works by using large amounts of training data that is then analyzed for correlations and patterns. These patterns are then used to predict outcomes based on the training data provided. So, for example, if I was to feed this training data, basically summarizing what each paragraph is about, So for example, here we are feeding in data saying that a paragraph looks like this, with this type of title, should be categorized as international finance. The second paragraph should be put in the category of earning reports, and so on. And with some code, we should be able to train our AI model to correctly guess what future paragraphs are about. And that's it. Of course, that is a super basic example, and we would need way more data than these 5 paragraphs right here, but you get the idea. If you want to build your own AI model and understand the concepts of machine learning better as a total beginner, please do check out my video on it on my channel, Code with Anya Kubo. For now, however, let's not make our own model, but use an existing model or large language model, PaLM 2, starting off with getting our API key in order to communicate with it first. Just like most APIs, the PaLM 2 API uses API keys for authentication. In this section, I'm going to show you how to get your own API key when it comes to communicating with the API from the applications that we will be building. Remember, make sure not to share or upload your API key anywhere public. If you do, someone might take it and use it for their own projects and use up all of your free tokens or rack up a huge credit card bill if you have a credit card attached. This also includes exposing it in any client-side code. By this, I mean building an app without a backend and deploying it onto the internet. The code in this case will be visible simply by inspecting it like so. Someone will then be able to go and get it and take it from here for their own use. To use this key safely, requests must be routed through your own backend server where your API key can be securely loaded from an environment variable or key management service. Okay, so in order to get your API key, make sure to visit this URL and then simply explore the API and then get your API key. This is super simple. All I'm going to do is click Get My API Key and agree to the terms of service and then simply create API key in new project. So that's all you're going to do, and here it is. You can copy it and make sure to keep it somewhere safe as mentioned, okay? And then you can delete it if you don't want it anymore and create a new one as well. That is totally up to you. Just make sure you have your API key ready for creating our projects. But first, let's have a look at the models available in PaLM 2 next. In PaLM 2, we have many generative models we can use. I'm going to take you through 4 of the more popular ones using the REST API. Please note there are many ways to interact with PaLM 2, including an SDK with Node.js, as well as all these ways you can see here. If you'd like to play around with them, please do so. For the sake of making this tutorial as accessible to as many developers as possible, I will stick to using the REST API with the curl command, however. So let's do it. Let's start with the generate text model first. The generate text model generates a response from the model given an input message. This means we can use it to ask PaLM 2 a question to which it will return a response, for example. Let's have a look at this step by step. Okay, so we're going to write a curl command. We're going to go to a specific URL. So let's get up our quote, and I'm just going to paste it. So it's https generativelanguage.googleapis.com. We're going to use v1 beta 2. We're going to get the models, and the models we're going to get, it's going to be for text. So we're going to use text bison 1. And then we're going to use the generate text model, and we're going to put in our API key. So just make sure to put in your API key. We did get this in the last section, so if you skip that, please have a look at how to get your own API key. This is mine, and this will be disabled soon. Okay, and end quote. Next, just make a space, and now we're going to write our header. And our header is going to say application JSON for the content type. Once again, this is a string, so put it in these quote marks. Great. Make a space, and next we're going to define this as a post. So I'm just going to put X post because it's a post request. And as the data, well, I'm going to have an object. I'm just going to paste it like so. Here's our object. And as the prompt, we have another object, and it's just going to be some text. And this is essentially the text or the string we want to send over to the PaLM 2 API in order to get a response. So we wanted to write a story about a magic backpack. Okay, and just hit enter and let it do its thing. And here we go. So here we have it. We received an object back and the output. Okay, so this is an array and the output is a story. Once upon a time, there was a young boy named Billy who loved to go on adventures. So this should be a story about a backpack. We have some other stuff here. We have safety rating as well. We have a category and probability. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about what else we're going to send over with our request next. With the generative text model, as we saw, we sent over a prompt. This is an object as we saw. So this right here, this is an object that has text as an attribute and the text or string as a value. Okay, so this is required. However, we have a bunch more things that we're going to pass through with this, which we did not. These are safety settings, stop sequences, temperature, and this controls the randomness of the output, with 0 being essentially less creative and values closer to 1 being more creative. We also have a candidate count, max output tokens, top P and top X. I will not be using these in the tutorial, okay? This is a bit more advanced. I'm just showing you a basic way in order to generate text. However, if you are interested in this, please do pause here and make a note of these and have a read through them in your own time. For now, let's continue. Next up, we have the generate message model. This is used to have more of a conversation in which we feed in not just a string, so just one question, but a bunch of previous conversations that we've had with the LLM. Okay, so this just means that it can build on the previous conversation and build on the previous stuff that you told it. I'm going to show you how to do this now. So first off, we're just going to write curl, and then we're going to paste in the URL. So once again, let's make this a string. And this time, I'm just going to show you where this goes. This goes to the generative-language.googleapis.com v1 beta 2 models. Chat this time, Bison instead of text, and we're going to use the generate message model, and we're just going to put in our API key. So just like we did before. Okay, great. Once again, we need to put in the header. This is going to be, once again, content type application JSON. So just like so as a string. And then I'm going to define this as a post request with the data. And the data, once again, this is going to be an object. It's going to have the property of prompt. So just like so. However, this time it's going to take multiple messages. So I've made an array in which we can put objects that will represent one message. So this one message essentially has the content of hi. That's going to be our first message. And if I just go ahead and hit enter, we get the response. So this is what we sent over. These are all our messages. There's just one in there for now. It says hi, that's what we sent over. And this is the response. Okay, so the responses are going to be saved under candidates. Here's an array of them. And the response essentially is hi. How can I help you today? Simple. Just like with a generate text model, we can also have different parameters. On this occasion, we can have a temperature. So again, setting 0 to be less random and 1 to be essentially more random or more creative. We can also have a candidate count, and this can return multiple responses. You can set the candidate count to be 1, for example, and actually as a default, it is 1, or you can choose a value between 1 and 8. We also have top P and top K, which we will not be covering in this tutorial. However, if you want to have a look at them, please pause here and read through this documentation now. Great. Let's continue. So let's go ahead and add some more messages in here, right? So I'm going to just get that back up again, and we're going to send this over to this URL to generate message, okay? But we're going to pass through a bunch more messages. So here is our first message, right? So it's the first object that has content hi. I'm just going to essentially put a comma right after it, and paste it. And this time as the content, I'm going to put the string of remember my name is Anya and ask me a question. So I'm sending over 2 messages now. Hi, and remember my name is Anya and ask me a question. And let's see what we get back. And great. So here are the messages we sent over. That's the full array. That's the first message of hi. And this is the second one of remember my name is Anya and ask me a question. And then the response is, hi Anya, it's nice to meet you. How can I help today? Great. Now let's have a look at how many tokens this cost us. Next. So as we are making requests, it is useful to know that this is costing us tokens. Each word is tokenized, okay? And it can be hard to figure out exactly how many tokens are being used. We can essentially use a HTTP request to find out exactly how many tokens are used for a message, as well as text. However, we're just going to look at the messages for now, so I'm going to use the count message tokens model. So let's go ahead and do it. I'm just going to get up my terminal once more. And in fact, I'm just going to bring up the last thing that we did. So here we have curl, and this is generate message, as well as our API key. And then as the header, we have content type application JSON. This is a post request. And as the data, again, we have the prompt with messages, the array of 2 messages. Okay. And all I'm going to do is just switch out the URL. So all I'm going to do is change this right here, generate message token, to count message token, just like so. And it should calculate exactly how many tokens these messages cost me. Okay, so just hit enter, and the token count is 27. Great. Okay, so we're now really done. I just want to touch on one topic, and that is touch on the topic of creating text embeddings. Now, this is a super interesting and advanced topic, and I really recommend you watch my video on vector embeddings in order to fully understand this, because I cannot fit this. It's outside of the scope of this tutorial. But essentially, the PaLM 2 API will also allow us to create text embeddings, or in other words, vector representations of words, for us to be able to search large databases for similar words. Okay, so I'm quickly going to show you how to do this. We're going to use the curl command, and then we're going to use the embedding text model along with our API key. So once again, this is the URL. We're going to embeddings gecko, and then we're going to use the embed text model, and we're going to put in our API key. So this one is mine. Please use your own. Finish off that string. Then we're going to put the header as content type application JSON, just like we have been doing. And once again, this is a post request. And as the data this time, I'm simply going to put an object, and it's going to have the text that we want to create into a text embedding. So this time is just the string of say something nice. And I'm going to hit enter, and ta-da! It's an array. So this array of numbers essentially represents the text of say something nice, which means that we can now use this array in order to search for similar texts in a large language model. So this is something that is super interesting. Please go ahead and watch this video after this if you have time. Otherwise, let's continue with building out our PaLM 2 chatbot. So we've learned about the models necessary to do this. We've also learned how to get our API key. So really, we're ready to go. Okay, so let's create a project. I'm going to start off using my code editor of choice, which is WebStorm. I'm going to save it in a directory called WebStorm projects. And in WebStorm, I can actually choose to essentially get the command npx create React app in order to spin up a React application. So again, this is going to be stored on my computer in WebStorm project. I'm going to go ahead and call this PaLM 2 chatbot, just like so. Okay, and I'm going to click create. So there we go. That is now doing its thing. It's essentially spinning up all the files we need in this directory. So here's one file, and more will get added. For For those of you who aren't using WebStorm, you can also choose a directory. So I'm going to once again go into WebStorm projects and then run the command npx create react app followed by whatever you would want to call the project. So for example, like this, and hit enter. And then this directory with all the files will be created in the directory WebStorm projects on your computer. But I'm not going to do it this way as I'm doing it this way. And we're just going to wait for that to do its thing. And great. So here we have the directory with all the files. As you can see here, this is looking wonderful. I'm just going to minimize that. So first off, I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. We're not going to be using this app CSS file as it's a small project. So I'm just going to delete this file. There we go, delete. Anyway, we're not going to be writing any tests, so that can go as well. No test for this project. Of course, you can add yours if you want at the end. And I'm going to delete these three too. So the logo and anything to do with testing or reporting web vitals will go. Wonderful. So now if we look in the index.js, again, I'm just going to delete everything we don't need so we can get rid of that. As well as this import, I'm also going to get rid of the semicolons as I don't want to use them in this project. So that is what the index.js file will look like at the moment. Then we've got the index.css, and I just want to start fresh. So I've deleted all of that. And then we have the app.js file. So once again, I'm just going to delete the logo as we're not importing that anymore. We're not importing the app.css file. I'm going to change this to a functional expression as that is my preference. So just like so. Just going to minimize that. And again, we're just going to start fresh. So I'm going to delete the contents of all of this and just return a singular div and delete the semicolons. Okay, so you should have the app.js file that looks like this, the index.css file, which is empty, and the index.js file, which looks like this. Great. And you will see that's all in the source directory. Now, as this is going to need a backend, I am going to create a backend for this project. I'm going to do it on the same level as the README and the package.json. So just go ahead and add a new file. This is going to be a JavaScript file. So let's go ahead and make that. I'm going to call it index.js, or you can call it server.js just to be more clear. It is up to you. Great. So we'll go to this in a bit. I just want to build out the UI of the chatbot first. This shouldn't be too complicated. Like I said, it's super basic. So let's do it. First off, I'm going to create a wrapping div, and I'm going to give this the class name of chatbot so we can pick it out in our CSS. Next, I'm going to actually have another div. This is going to, well, we can make it I'm just going to give it the class name of chat header. Notice I'm not putting it in a header element. This is because I don't want to. It's not a technical header to the document. Now in here, what I'm going to do is also create another nested div, and this is just going to contain some information. So let's give this the class name of info container so we can style it up. And I'm going to include the h3 element with chat with, so that's a heading, as well as a bigger title. So that's why I'm using h2, and it's just going to say the PaLM2 bot. Great. So there we go. Under here, so just under the info container, I'm actually going to put an SVG, but we'll come back to that. And now that is it. So that is our whole chat header. Under the chat header, I'm going to make another div, and this is actually going to be the feed. So the feed of all the messages. So let's go ahead and give this the class name. I'm going to just do feed like so. Great. And once in here, I'm going to map messages. I'm actually going to map onto two divs because we're going to have one div for the question bubble. So let's give this the class name of question, as it's going to be a question. And this is also going to have the class name of bubble because I want both of these to essentially look like a bubble, but be differentiated by the color. So this is going to be for the question that we ask our chatbot, and this is going to be for the response. Okay, cool. So that is our feed. And under our feed, we're going to have I think we should probably just have a text area. Okay, so this is essentially where we're going to ask the chatbot that question. We're going to write it in. And this is a self-closing element, and it's going to have a value, which is going to be some text. We're going to leave that blank for now. And then an on-change event, because we want to essentially save the question to the state of this component. So let's just comment that out for now and continue. And finally, I'm just going to have a button. And this button is also going to have an on click, which is going to generate the response. Okay, so essentially this is where all the magic's going to happen. We're going to write in something to our chatbot. I'm going to click on this button. It's going to send it over to our server and essentially come back with the answer to our question from the PaLM 2 API. Great. On the button, I'm also just going to use this text icon symbol. Okay, it's this little arrow right here. If you can't see it, looks like that. Just make that a bit smaller. And that's essentially our whole app at the moment. If you want to find this text icon, just go ahead and visit this URL right here in order to get the same one and just copy it like so. Wonderful. Okay, so now I think it's time to spin up our app. So I'm just going to go ahead and spin this up by clicking this button right here. And that should spin up our application. So great. I'm just going to comment this out for now in order to get this to work. And wonderful. There we go. That's what we should see. And I'm just going to go ahead and inspect this page in order to get up our console here so we can debug. Now, for those of you not using WebStorm, I'm just going to stop this from running. You can just go ahead and have a look at the package JSON in order to spin this up. We're just going to use this command right here, start. This just means I'm just going to shut this down and get up our terminal. That in here, so just make sure that you're in the project. You can do npm run start. And that will do the same thing. It will essentially run the app and spin it up on localhost 3000. You can do that there, or you can do that on here too, right? So you can do cd and then whatever you store the project, cd PaLM 2 chatbot npm run start, and that will spin up the app. So those three ways are all viable. It's up to you, whichever way you want to do it. Great. So there we go. We've spun up our app. Let's just get to styling up a little bit first. I'm just going to minimize that for now. So let's get up our index CSS files. First off, I'm just going to grab the whole body of the app, and I'm going to start fresh by overriding the margin and padding to start off with 0. And then I'm just going to change the background color of this app, so background color, and I've pre-picked a color. It's a kind of very light grayish, 227, 227, 227. So that's what it should be. And then I'm just going to make sure that the chatbot is aligned to a certain part of the browser. So perhaps let's go ahead and actually style that chatbot first. So let's grab the chatbot. I'm literally looking for the element with the class name, dot means class name of chatbot. And I'm just going to give it a height of 500 pixels, a width of 400 pixels. Let's give it a background color as well, background color. And I'm just going to go with white. So that is the RGB for white. Great. While we're here, I'm just going to also give it a border radius. And what I'm going to do is make sure that the top left-hand corner is rounded by 20 pixels. Top right-hand corner is also, but the two bottom ones are 0. Now, I'm going to give it a margin as well, okay? Just to space it out a little bit, you will see why. So I'm going to go 20 pixels at the top, 20 pixels on the right, 0 at the bottom, and 20 pixels on the left. And finally, I'm also just going to give it a box shadow, okay, to kind of make it pop out from the background. So again, I'm using RGBA because this time I want to add a transparent, I guess, argument into here. So I'm going to give it 0.16 for transparency and the color black. And now I'm going to do 0 pixels x-axis, 10 pixels y-axis, 36 pixels blur, and 0 spread. So there we go. And then we're going to do 2 box shadows actually. So RGBA again. This time it's going to be black, but 0.06 is what I'm going to do for opacity. And then essentially just have 1 pixel spread. Great. So now if we look in here, it looks kind of like this. But we want to position this, right? I want to position it so it kind of moves with the browser and is always here. And for that, I'm going to use display. And then I'm going to initialize flexbox. So flex. And I'm going to justify content end. Okay? So if we save that, it's already here, and I want to go to the bottom as well. You will see it's not exactly all the way here because we gave it a margin, right? We gave it a margin on all the 3 sides apart from the bottom. So now let's move it to the bottom. So, and for this, I actually need to assign a height to the body, otherwise this will not work. So I'm going to 100% of the viewport height, and I'm going to use align items end as well. So now that will be here. And no matter how much I move the browser and how big I make it, it will always be there. Amazing. This is coming out well. The other thing I want to do is to the whole body, just add a font family. So I'm going to actually use Arial and then sans serif as a backup. While we're here though, I'm also going to add the H2 and H3 element in here for styling, and I'm just going to apply a margin of 5 pixels to both. Okay, just to space those out, but also override any pre-existing margin. Great. Let's move on. The next thing I want to actually grab is the info container. So essentially stuff that holds this. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab the info container just like so, give it a height of 60 pixels and a background of, I'm actually going to use a linear gradient for this. So let's get the linear gradient method, and I'm just going to pass through RGB, so color, into here. I'm going to use 22197.141 and then RGB 620.84. Okay, so at the moment it will look like this. And then we're actually going to add an SVG here to the bottom. But first off, we need to essentially hide any overflow, right? Because at the moment that box is overflowing what we set before in terms of the actual chatbot. So I'm actually going to also on the chatbot do overflow hidden. And that just means that any overflow is hidden. Wonderful. Let's also add a padding to this so all the letters aren't so squashed up to the side of the info container. And I'm going to change the color of the text to be an off-white, so not exactly white. And that is the color I'm going to choose. So already is looking much better. Cool. Before we move on to the SVG or anything like that, I'm just going to grab the text area as well. So we've commented out the text area at the moment. Here it is. So maybe let's put these back in, but just get rid of these, as that is why we are getting errors. So here's our text area. I'm just going to style it up. So let's grab it. This is super basic styling, right? This is a basic chatbot that you can take and, you know, make your own, style it up and all that. So position absolute, I'm going to give it, and it's going to be positioned to the chatbot, which means this I'm going to need to give a position of relative to, because we don't really want this to move, but we do want this to move. We want it to be absolute based on where it is in the chatbot. And this just means I can use bottom 0 to place it at the bottom 0 of the chatbot element or its parent element, and left 0. So if we look in here, it's going to be here, bottom 0, left 0, right? So that's where it would be. And let's style it up a little bit further. Now I'm going to get rid of that border. So I'm going to do border none and make sure that the width, like I said, is 100% width of the parent, which is the chatbot. And the box sizing, I'm also going to give it border box. So there's no funky behavior happening. It's like inside the box rather than overspilling. And now I'm just going to give it some padding as well. So 25 pixels on the top, 70 pixels on the right, because we're going to put a button there, and 25 pixels on all the other sides. So that's the padding inside the text area. One last thing I'm going to do is just add a border just to the top, though. I'm going to make it 1 pixel solid and a kind of off whitish color too. So there we go. That's looking good. Now I don't want the text area to be in focus, so to get rid of that, this is easy. You just grab the text area once more, and when it's in focus, I just want the outline to be none. So that will get rid of that if you are curious. Great. Now let's actually grab the button, as we're going to have to make it essentially go here, so let's do it. Let's give it a height. I'm going to give it a height of 40 pixels, as well as the width of 40 pixels, as I want it to be a circle, which means that border radius, I'm going to give it 50%. The background color, again, let's pick this out. I'm going to make it 620/84. Yes, I did pick this out already. It's a green. And then the inside, so the text inside, which is the arrow, is going to be 207. 207, 207. So kind of in line with the off-white we saw before. Again, I need to position it, so I'm going to go a position of absolute. And this time from the bottom of the chatbot, I'm going to place it 21 pixels. And to the right, I'm going to make it 21 pixels. So that it should appear essentially here. Cool. Now let's also start the bubbles. So we're going to grab anything. There should be 2 in there with a class of bubble. And each bubble of text that appears is going to be in a bubble that is width 250 pixels. Let's pad it out 20 pixels. I'm going to get a margin from the top and bottom 10 pixels to space it out from any other bubbles, and 25 pixels from the left and right. Let's also round it off a little bit by 10 pixels, so it's not so harsh, it's not a rectangle, and also give it a box shadow so that it sticks out from the background. I'm going to use RGBA, make it black, and then for opacity, I'm going to put 0.24. And then 0 on the x-axis, 3 pixels on the y-axis, and 8 pixels blur. In fact, we don't really need that 0 here either, because the spread, if you don't put anything, is automatically 0. Great. And then the color of the text in here is not going to be black, it's going to be an off black. I don't want to be too harsh, so that is the color that I'm going to choose. So at the moment, our 2 bubbles look like this, but we want to give both of them a different color based on if it's a question or a response. So let's pick out the question. And the background color for this, I'm actually going to make it 244, 244, 244. And then the response, I'm going to maybe keep it white. But what I will do is override the margin left and just make it 85 pixels. Okay? So that it's going to look like that. Question, response, question, response. I mean, we're pretty much done. We just have the SVG last. So I left this last so that you can just stick it in. Essentially, what I did is went to SVG generator. So this one right here by Heike. And then I just made a wave. So that's all I did essentially. I'm going to start designing for free. I've got the wave, so that's essentially what it looks like. And then I simply just kind of played around with it really. So just play around with it yourself. You can make it more or less of a wave. It is up to you. And then I just downloaded it. So again, do the same. Please obviously change the colors to be more in line with the colors that we have here. So in other words, you want the green here and then for it to go to white, right? So please do the same. I've already done this and exported the SVG. So that's what mine looks like. You will see the fill here as well. If you are struggling, please feel free to take my code. Of course, I'm not going to code this out because that path is just ridiculous. So please do take this from the code that I've shared in the video description below, or have a go at, making this yourself here, just like I told you. So just make sure that the fill here is the same color green. So Let's have a look at what green this is this one, which is essentially this color code and the background. I mean, you can make it white or you can just hide it completely, okay? And then just download the SVG. So wonderful. Of course, you might need to flip this around. So just make sure to do it by changing the direction as well. Okay, let's move on. I think we're now ready to actually get some of those messages coming through. So let's do it. So now on the server, I'm just going to define a few things. The first one is the port. It's going to be port 8000. Just going to make this bigger for you. We're going to have const express, require express, because that's a package we're going to need for routing. And then once we have this, okay, so we're going to import the package express, and then we're going to save it as the const express, and we're going to get express and release all of its wonderfulness. So that's us releasing it, and save it under the const app. Okay, so we can use it with all of its methods later on. We're also going to need cause so that we can get rid of any pesky messages blocking us. You know, when you see blocked by cause, that will help us get around that. And we're also going to be working with variables, secret variables. And in order to do that, we're going to also require another package, is the .env package. And that is the code in order to be able to use it in this project. Okay? Also, as I believe we are going to be using JSON, I'm just going to, for safe measure, use express JSON here. So we can pass it from the front end to the back end. And then I'm just going to use cause as well. So we can override. And then I'm just going to use cause as well, like I said, so that essentially we can bypass when we are blocked by cause. Great. Now let's go ahead and import those. I'm going to do npm I and import express cause and .env. So just hit that right there. And then in your package JSON file, you should see those popping up. So there they are, along with their versions. So if you're watching this in the future and this doesn't work, it could be the version you're using. Just revert back to this one right here. So just change it. Obviously, I'm not going to. And then do npm I again to reinstall those packages with those versions. Cool. Let's move on. So now that we have those, let's actually start up our backend first. I'm just going to listen out to the port just to make sure that everything's working. So listen port, and then we're just going to do console log listening on port and then the port number. So let's do it. I need to get my package JSON file up again, and I'm going to write a script. So I'm going to do start backend, and then we're just going to do nodem1. We're going to listen out continuously. So that's another package we need to install, npm I nodem1, and this will continuously listen out for changes. Make sure to save this first. npm nodem1. Maybe just cut that out first as it's causing errors. Install that. Make sure that nodem1 is there to listen out for constant changes, and then just put that back in. So nodem1, I'm going to listen out to the file server.js. So there we go. Okay, making sure that is a string. While we're here, I'm just going to change this script to start front end so it's more obvious, and let's continue. So now that we've done that, let's start up our backend. And this should start up on port 8000. So I'm going to do npm run start backend this time. I'm not going to restart the front end as it's already running. So there we go. So now if we go to, I'm going to just shut these down. Local host 8000. There we go. And it should say listening on port 8000, and it is. So everything is looking good. Our front end is running and our back end is running. So now we're going to have to use a few things here. We're going to have the language model API key that we're going to get from the PaLM2 portal. So const language model API key. And yes, I am going to store this in an env file. And the other thing we're going to need is the URL that we're going to essentially call. So first off, to access anything in a .env file, let's go ahead and make that env file.file.env. We, of course, as I mentioned, need this required.env in order to use process.env and then look in the .env file for something that corresponds. So if I literally maybe just copy this and define it in here, this is where we're going to save it. Okay, great. So process.env.language model API key. We're going to look in here for that and grab whatever we put here in order to populate this and save it as the const language model API key. So that's one thing we're going to have to do. We're also going to get the language model URL. And this, again, we're going to get from the documentation. So let's do it. Let's go to the PaLM 2 page and let's get that API key. Okay, so there's my API key. Please do generate your own. I'm going to disable this. It won't work. Make sure to get your own and keep it safe. Great. Now for the language model URL. So we're going to be using the model URL here. However, as of recent, PaLM 2 has also got some methods that you can get from certain packages if you install them. So just keep that in mind. I'm just going to go super basic. Like I said, this is a very basic tutorial and use the model URL. So the model URL for this is HTTPS, and then we're going to go with generative language Google APIs. Thank you, tab 9. It's completed it for us. I'm just checking if it's right. googleapis.com v1. It's actually v1 beta 1. And then maybe let's just delete this as that is not correct. Models, and we're going to get the chat by Sun 01 model. Generate message model, and then we're just going to get the key, which is our API key, and essentially pass it through. So language model API key, that is correct. So that is the whole thing. There we go. I'm just making sure that it's correct again. So models, we're using the generate message model. And there we go. Make sure that's in backticks, otherwise this code will not be picked up. And we're telling our code editor that this is code by essentially using the $ and passing it through curly braces like so. Great. So we've got our language model URL. Let's move on. Now we can write a request. So what we're going to do is essentially send some text from the front end to our back end and then send it over to the PaLM 2 API so we can get a response, right? So we're going to ask a question and get a response. So let's write our root. We're going to use the get method for this. And I'm going to say that if we go to localhost 8000/prompt/ and then we're going to get the text from the URL. So that is how you do it. Just zoomed in so you can see it a little bit better. This is going to be an async method where we get the request and the response. And then we're going to essentially get that text from you using request params text. So we can define it here. Yeah, you can do it like this, or you can do it like so. It is up to you. So there's our text. Now let's define our payload. Payload equals, and this payload is actually taken from the documentation. We're going to have to get the prompt and then define the messages that are going through. So we're going to pass through a whole array of them. Like I said, each time we're just going to be sending through one message. Okay, this is just one message that we're sending over and we're getting a response. So let's send over that one message, essentially an object, and that object's going to have content, and the content is literally going to be this text. Okay, so that's what we're sending over to the API. We can also set a temperature for this. Okay, so here's our prompt object. In fact, maybe just to make it a little bit more readable, I'm just going to make it all on one line. Like so. So there's our prompt. Next, we pass through the temperature. I'm going to set it as 0.1. And the candidate count, which is going to be a 1 as well. Now that we have that, we can get the response. So let's define the response. This is going to use fetch, which is an async method. So we use await, and then we're going to pass through the URL that we're going to visit along with headers. So let's set some headers. We're going to do content type application JSON. And then as the body, we're going to get the payload and just pass it through JSON stringify. And this is going to be a post method. So there we go. So again, what we're doing is we're sending this over. So all of this with the text from the URL to PaLM2 and essentially to this endpoint, essentially, right? So it's going to this endpoint along with all of this stuff. And then let's await that response. So let's await the response. Let's get its JSON, but this is an async method. So we use the await keyword and let's save it under data. And once we have that data, I'm just going to send it back. Okay, great. So at the moment, this will actually work. I won't have to do much. Let's just console log this data at the moment too. I can simply go /prompt and then hello. So this text of hello is the text passed over into the URL, right? And there we go. So once again, the text was hello. That's what we passed through to the backend and sent it over to the PaLM2 API, as you will see here. So there's our messages. There's just one message. And this is the response that we are getting from PaLM2. Hello, how can I help you today? So now let's display that here, right? So we've got the question and the answer. We've got the data. Let's display it. We're also going to have to pass through this word from the front end. So here, rather than just typing it out like so. So this should be relatively painless. Let's do it. So let's go back to the app. I'm going to have to import state. So import use state from React. We're not going to need use effect. And next, we're just going to save the state of the text. So const text, set text, and use state is going to be an empty string to start off with. And then we're also going to save the messages that come back. So we're going to call it messages, just to keep kind of in line with the messaging so far that has been used. So messages, set messages, and this is going to be an empty array to start off with, just like so. So in order to get the response, so const get response, this is going to be an async method. And when do we want to get the response? Well, as soon as we click on this button. So on click of this, we're going to get the response. And we're going to get the response by essentially using the value in the text area. So here again, I'm just going to make sure that the value is the text. So currently that will be an empty string. And then on change of anything in this text area, I'm going to set the text. So we're going to get the event and set text. So essentially changing the state of text to be target value. Okay, just in case you do not believe me that we are changing this, I'm just going to console log it out, console log text so you can see it. So in the console log here now, if I write hello, that is text because we're console logging out the const text and it's constantly changing. So now that we have the text, let's send it over to the backend so that we can get the response. So I'm going to define the response. I'm going to use await fetch, and we're going to pass through literally the backend, so localhost 8,000. Make sure that says 8,000. Use backticks here as we're going to essentially write the endpoint, which is this. Okay, so you can just paste it like so. I'm going to replace this with code. So once again, we get the $, the curly braces, and we're just going to use text. So that is now the equivalent of us essentially writing this out. Essentially, maybe let's get rid of that. And what do we do with the response? Well, we're going to grab the response, get its JSON like so. Let's await this as well and save this as data. And then once we have the data, we're actually going to set the messages right here. So we're going to set messages, and then we're going to essentially open up an array, and whatever messages already exist, okay, so at the moment none do, we're going to get those and then append a new object. So we're going to make a new object. Just going to put it down here so maybe it's a little bit more readable for you. And our objects are going to look like this. Well, we're just going to have the author, and then we're going to get that data that comes back to us. So we know what this looks like. We saw it before. We're going to go into the messages. We're going to go into the first, as it's always really going to be one message, and we're going to get its content. Okay? Because we saw it before. We had the messages content, which is the message that we sent over. And then we also have data candidates content, and that was what the API sent back to us. And we'll save this under bot. So we've constructed this object, okay, we've just made it up because this is what we're going to use in order to map onto our divs. Okay, cool. So let's try this out. I'm also going to console log messages here so we can see what's going on. And I'm also actually going to console log the data here, just so, again, it's just really obvious what is going on. So data, messages. And let's try this out. So once again, let's just start fresh. So messages and state is currently nothing. However, if I write hello, okay, still nothing. This is our text. And I send this over. Suddenly, this is the data that comes back, right? Like I said, this is what it looks like. We've got candidates and we've got an array. At the moment, it just has one item in there. And it's essentially the response from the API. Hello, how can I help you? And then we also have messages in here. And this is the message that we sent over. Author, that's us, and the content, hello. Okay? Cool. And then once we get that data back, I'm essentially using it to create our own object. So this is the object that we created. I've just got author and bot, and we've just taken the content from both of these and stuck it in our own object. So we just stuck in a message in here. Now I'm going to map the content of this object onto these two. So this is easy. I'm just going to go down here. Let's comment this out for now. I'm going to grab the messages. And if they exist, I'm going to map each message. We're going to have an index as well. We're going to map it. In fact, we don't need that onto all of this. So just like so, let's uncomment this out just like that. So I'm just going to delete this and wrap this in something. So let's make a new div. This is actually going to hold our key as well. So there we go. Just cut that, paste it in here, and then for this, I'm going to have a key, and it's just going to be the index. Great. So now onto here as the text, I'm going to go into the message and get the author. So once again, this is just from the object that we made. We're going into the object, getting author, and then we need to do the same for bot. So perhaps I'll just copy this and then write bot. So if we save that, we will be able to see it. And if I write something else, let's write, how are you? And send that over. You will see now there are two messages in here. However, if you look in data, okay, it's still just the one message that comes back because we're not sending over all of that data to the API, okay? We're just sending over the text. So essentially this text right here, just keep that in mind as each question will be unrelated to another, Okay? If you want to, of course, expand on this, you're more than welcome to. I'm just pointing that out that, you know, when you're having conversation, it won't build on its previous knowledge. It will treat each question as an individual question unrelated to the previous. Great. So we're seeing all of that. One last thing, however, because if you look in the feed, we need to be able to scroll. So let's go back to our CSS. So maybe let's grab the whole feed just like that. I'm going to do position absolute bottom 82 pixels to kind of space it out from the bottom. Left positioning 0. Width, I want it to be 100% of the parent, and height, I'm going to constrain it to be 250 pixels so we can scroll through it. So I'm going to do overflow on the y-axis, scroll. Okay, so now we should be able to scroll. And this is looking great. Another thing we can do is if we are, you know, seeing some dodgy behavior here, maybe we need to also position the x-axis so it's always in front. I'm just going to grab the header. So the chat header right here. And do position relative Z index 1. Okay, and that is now much better. Great. So hopefully that makes sense. I hope you found this useful, and I hope that you can share your chatbots with me. Please take them, build them, maybe use different models, start them up. I'd love to see what you have made. Please tag me on socials, on Twitter. And yeah, I hope to see you again on another tutorial soon.